Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the OMNIA Performance Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Fergus Crawley.
And I'm the other, Jonny Payne.
And together we are OMNIA Performance. Get very in sync. We're never going to nail this, but everybody keeps hearing us do this in these intros, and the false promise that it's going to get nailed is exactly that, a false promise. Anyway, the usual, do the likey, subscribey, followy, rate and reviewy stuff that we always ask from you. And if you're new around here, then please share this episode with a friend. Make sure to save it to your podcast listening rota cadence so that you are tuning into an episode every Thursday. And if you're not aware, all of these are live on YouTube as well, and we will run clips through social media. So just make sure you're involved, yeah? Cheers.
Tune up, tune out, drop out. Oh, yeah. Sorry,
I
just woke up.
Yeah, I mean, hello. If you're watching, you'll see Jonny has just had a bit of a dimensional break.
Just at a moment.
Yeah, but anyway, we will move on. And today what we're going to do is debrief the Double Brutal Extreme Triathlon, which for the uninitiated, which would be very difficult as we have not shut up about it for quite a while now, it is a double Ironman distance in an extreme setting, plain and simple. So an extreme triathlon, the nuance is really it's inclusive of lots of elevation on the bike and on foot. And then the X-Tri World Tour normally incorporates harsher, colder environments, but in this circumstance the water was actually quite manageable. So in this case, lots of elevation, disgusting distances, and those distances were unfortunately as follows: a 7.6 kilometer swim, a 373 kilometer bike ride with 6,000 meters for our American friends. Yes, meters, which is like 1 million feet of elevation gain.
Made me laugh more than they should, that.
Yeah. And what comes next? The run, yes.
The run,
84.4 kilometres of running with Snowdon, which is the tallest mountain in Wales and part of the National Three Peaks for those that are familiar, and 2,100 metres of elevation gain in total. So 8,100 metres of elevation in total, 7.6k swim, 373k bike, and 84.4k run, and one bad time.
Surprisingly, no elevation on the swim, though.
I've had a few people commenting that on YouTube, hilariously, originally. It was a joke I wanted to make myself, but I thought, you know what, just have a day off, Fergus. Have a day off. And Jonny has not had a day off.
Somebody will fill it in.
Yeah. Anyway, what we're going to do, give you a bit of context in terms of the prep, how we approach things, what we think we did right. Ultimately, it was a challenging prep. I'm going to reflect on it from my personal perspective. Jonny's going to reflect on it from a friend and third-party coach point of perspective. And then, that was a lot of P's. I kind of went...
Jonny Payne. Should have thrown that one in as well.
Yeah. Pain, pithy, pipered.
Sounds great for the microphone.
Anyway, you're very
drunk,
distracted. I don't know. You drove me here. Where were we? Wow, you've really slammed my train of thought. Jonny ran 50k, just showed up and rocked up and did 50k, which is pretty cool. So thank you. I was going to be more romantic and poetic about that, but that's all he's getting after.
That's all it is.
Insolence. Really. And that's pretty hybrid in our terms. So well done, Jonny.
Cheers.
Thank you very much. It was useful and frustrating at points because of the headspace that I found myself in, but we'll get onto that. So context around the prep. The planning, preparation, programming considerations were all discussed in a previous podcast, so do go back and listen to that. But from my perspective, the prep was as good as it could have been within the circumstances. I had the Keltman in June, and then we had this in September. So not the biggest prep in the world for double the distance. And there are a lot of things going on commercially, all good things, so I'm not going to complain, but lots of things that need a lot of my time, cognitive energy, passion, focus, all of that stuff. There's only a finite amount that I've got on a day-to-day basis. So it was very, very challenging to make these things work. And it did start to spiral a little bit, whereby I lost my breakpoint Sundays. Sundays for me are normally my day of no training, no time on my phone, no time at my desk. And that's something that's really valuable and restorative for me. However, with the sheer training volume required, the sheer work and business volume required, I lost those Sundays. So it was 3 to 5 hours of running, generally speaking. It obviously built as time went on. And the work got sort of more and more demanding as time went on, because each week's volume built, which meant each week's worth of work was getting pushed further and further back around it. So I had to play catch up on Sundays, basically. So that meant it was 7 days on for a extended period of time, and that started to wear me down. And you actually started to notice that I was probably psychologically challenged and that my mental health was actually suffering before I flagged it to you, didn't you?
Yeah, for sure. Just a little. I mean, it would be difficult to describe it for the purpose of the podcast, but as a friend, first and foremost, and as a colleague, secondly, you just see the little fissures and cracks start to form. The slight differences in communication style, slight differences even in, just what you're saying and how you're saying it. Just, it's subtle, but if you know a person enough, it's there. So we flagged a conversation that needed to happen and addressed some of the essentially overtraining, really, or certainly the nature of it had become overwhelming.
It was over demanding, I think, because physically it wasn't the physical stuff. It wasn't I was doing too much volume.
No, I guess I'm wrong to say overtraining, because people immediately sort of fly to that kind of argument, and I'm not really describing that. I'm just describing the fact that you had too many plates spinning, too much on your plate, and far too much going on, and not enough headspace for it. And really, we had to kind of sculpt that a little bit better for you, didn't we? And allow you the opportunity to kind of live through it, as opposed to it becoming all-encompassing, which really detracts from the whole point of it in the first place. And you were feeling that, weren't you?
I really was. And yeah, the switch that I've described in the podcast that I recorded for them on Mind yesterday, we're going to make this more performance-focused than psychology in general terms. But ultimately, the switch that I felt sort of flipped was, I'm fortunate enough to enjoy 100% of what I do. I mean, other than accounting, admin, and boring email stuff and all that, but the individual pillars of what I do on a day-to-day basis are things that I enjoy, I have control over, and I'm very fortunate to do so. But as a result of that, it means that I'm working pretty much all the time in some capacity, because training is working, traveling up and down to different places to film videos, whatever it is. Lots of things I've got going on, but it's all encompassed within the concept of work. However, when things became overbearing and the joy was taken away from them because of the stress, I was suddenly doing things that I wasn't enjoying all of the time. So it went from being a very big positive, a very aggressive negative quite fast. And that meant that I very quickly had to have a frank conversation with myself and those around me about how to fix that. We've documented it a bit on YouTube, but ultimately, what did we do? We sat down and we basically determined, reduce my training volume around realistically what I can manage within the context of a day. Aerobic capacity was there, so a lot of it was actually just refining and sort of pushing the needle in the right direction for the specific demands of the project, but ultimately take that stress of the additional sessions that I was struggling to fit in away, so that the stress wasn't there, because that would allow me to sleep better, that would allow me to be more content day to day, that would allow me to get more quality from each session. And there'll be some people out there that are probably surprised at the actual total amount of volume that we, I don't want to say get away with, but that we make use of for training for big events, because we're balancing strength work as well. We can't just get away with stupid mileage, because it'll break us. So we just did what was needed and no more. And that got me in a much better headspace, allowed me to pull myself back a little bit. We took a few Sundays off to get me back in that rhythm. And that got me back in a headspace that was much more set up for success.
Much more positive, yeah. You also had the opportunity when you reached out, and I guess this speaks to your podcast in the Modern Mind as well, that reaching out to myself and others allows you then to look at what you're doing more objectively as well. If you can then kind of triangulate that thought process and then look and say, okay, yeah, I'm training hard here, so when am I easing off? Am I easing off? At what point have I got the opportunity to look at this and look forward to it, etc., etc. All that stuff happened, and you're able to look at it and go, oh yeah. So you weren't even being told anything you didn't know or realize. It's just having the opportunity to kind of hold a mirror up to it and say, these are where the breakpoints are. This is what we can do to fix it. And it was a night and day psychological change, wasn't it? But then we saw that, as we'll get into, in the. I think if we continued in that vein, you would have gotten to the end of the prep and you would have gotten to the start of the brutal. But I'm not confident that you'd have finished it. Whereas easing off and changing the structure and allowing you to realize that you had already met the demands that were necessary in terms of preparation, and really what you needed to do was extend the taper in essence. That changed the game for us, didn't it? And
it
for you
did.
especially.
It did. And that ultimately got me to the start line. So quickly on the start line, we had a lot of stuff going on in terms of filming and demands on the Friday, which meant that probably wasn't the ideal setup practically, logistically, or psychologically the day before, but that is the essence of what we do around documenting these things. The videos don't come out of thin air. There is more required to make them happen. So we probably, we made the most of what we had in front of us for all parties involved. So there were 2 media teams there, and we did what we could to get the best out of the situation. But it did mean that I went to bed thinking, whoa, that was a big day, and wasn't quite unwound as much as I would be before the following morning. So start line, not much to report really. In terms of performance metrics going into this, I'll cover them for each individual component, but the goal was finish. The rough estimate that I had was 36 to 39 hours. That's what I would have been happy with. And that was based on logical considerations, a bit of wiggle room, what I thought I'd be capable of, deterioration, and lots of data-driven insight. But ultimately, it was a complete stab in the dark. And I think that's important to mention at this point, because a lot of people go into events with very hard and fast expectations on where they want to finish, and that can often actually ruin the sheer achievement of getting to the finish line. And if you're 2 minutes, if you set your eyes on the sub 10 hour Ironman and you come in at 10 hours and 2 minutes, but that's the first time that you've done that Ironman course, that's the first time that you've done a triathlon. I know some people have gone sub 10 first time. I know some people have been so close, but you don't want to get to the end of your first Ironman and think, oh God, what failed. No. Because you set the goal of sub 10. So I think ultimately having parameters to work within is great. But ultimately all you can do is ask yourself the question, have I done enough to get through this to the ability that I want to? If the answer is yes, great. Crack on and see what happens. If the answer is no, crack on and see what happens. Because you're there, you're at the start point, and the skin is very much in the game. But you're not going to change anything between now and the finish line because the prep is done. So have things to aim for, but I think the one bit of advice I'd give is give wiggle room either side. So ideal scenario, I want to go sub 10. Let's stick with that example just because the numbers are neat. I want to go sub 10. But you know what? I've never done an Ironman before, so anything under 11 hours would be really, really good, because sub 12 is like a good mark of performance in Ironman. If I can go an hour under that in my first go, that's going to be great. But sub 10 is what I want. But also I'm really good on the bike, and this bike course is fast, flat. There's an outside chance if everything goes perfectly to plan, it might begin with something beginning below 9:30, and that would be fantastic. That'd really show Kev at the office. So you've then got 3 tiers that you can work within, and you can be excited about whatever the result is. Yeah, if you have a mechanical, you have a puncture, and you come in at 11:30, then things out with your control happened, as they did for me. But I think the mistake I've made in the past is being too performance metric driven, and that's ultimately ruined the event for me because it's created more internal pressure, which has made the emotional control and problem solving that needs to happen during these races more difficult to process. So
it's always useful to have, we've discussed this before in a slightly different context, but it's always useful to have, and really just to kind of overlay what you've just said, in fact, a kind of a plan B and a plan C and a plan D. So best case scenario, I want to hit this number. Okay, but if the mechanical happens, let's assume that takes X amount of time to fix. I want to hit this number. But you should probably run through all the parameters and say, you know, if there's so many things that can go wrong that I always think it's
and
worth...
the longer the event, the more likely.
Yeah,
as well.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's certainly not worth labouring those points in your head and focusing on the negative at all, but recognising that these things can go wrong and actually factoring them in and saying, okay, so if all the things go wrong, what's the worst case scenario? And then work back from that, because you're never going to be disappointed if you accept that so much is not in your control, that all you need to do is go out there and just have fun. And it's as simple as that, isn't it?
And there's examples like, I know people have crashed on full distance triathlons and then managed to go on and finish. I'm like, oh, I came in 14 hours. But you also fucking crashed and finished the race, you mad bastard. So it's like, well, you weigh these things up. Yeah. And powerlifting was one of the things that ultimately, one of a myriad of things that kind of put me off that sport and individual discipline was, I'd go into competitions wanting to squat 260, let's say. I'd never squatted before 240 in a comp, and I'd open on 242.5 PB. Best squat I've ever done. But because I failed 260, I wasn't happy. Yeah. The parameters and how you frame things in your head are very important. So bottom line, to circle back, getting my wetsuit on that morning, I was calm, nervous, out of fear of the sheer scale of the thing, but not nervous in the same way I would be before the Keltman, where there's time-focused performance metrics to worry about. It was more a real fear of the unknown, because this was going into sleep deprivation territory. This was going into an entirely different day, in fact. So we were going into an area that we could only reflect on logically rather than from a lot of experience.
Yeah, certainly from your perspective as an athlete, there were many things that were going to happen that just hadn't happened. We'll get to it, but one of which was cycling through the night. It's as simple as that, and we will get to that. But yeah, I can understand and appreciate it. Before you said that your feelings on the start line would be very different, because now it's a course of looking at the magnitude of the things as opposed to, right, I'm at the swim, my time expected is X. Yeah. It was like, oh God, this is
I'm doing it.
The beginning of 2 days. have I got this?
But important thing there is actually breaking it down in terms of time metrics. Yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm not being rude and just get my phone out for anyone watching. I'm going to get the timings out just so I've got them in front of me. But for reference, I went into the swim aiming for about 2:45, which was a leisurely swim for me. And in a double, the swim is just get it done and you'll be sound. 15 minutes here or there, who cares? Oh, I've swam faster than you. Great.
Well played.
Yeah, nice one, mate. But also, if I add a pressure of performance metrics around it, then all I do is start worrying, thinking too much, trying to speed up and break out of my rhythm. Whereas in reality, get through the swim, enjoy it as much as you can, see where you end up. End up. That was sorry, I might have deafened you headphone users with my aggressive tut there. But I'll skip ahead. I came out in 2:53.23, which is 8 minutes. Not slower, 8 minutes. Again, it's within the wiggle room. I want to be done by 3 hours. So there we are, job done. And the average for that was 2:14 per 100 meters. And that was inclusive of the 4 times that I was out of the water. So the format was 4 sets of 2 at 1900 meters a pop. So half iron distance swim times 4, which is, again, going back to breaking up, psychologically, great way of breaking up into 4 by 1 900 meters. And physically as well, it gave you that opportunity to feed, it gave you the opportunity to get some hydration on board, it gave me the opportunity to have a bit of shit crack with the boys and get just a bit of a reset going into the next. So the magnitude of it was really broken down, and I promised myself not to look at my watch until I got out on each lap. So pacing as I went wasn't something I was focusing on. Even when my Garmin beeped as it was doing the lap 500 meters feature, just ignored it and just went at a pace that felt pleasant, is the way I'd describe it. And that turned out to be in the ballpark that I was hoping for. So happy days. And what I will say is I really, really enjoyed it, because for the first time in a while, the pressure to perform was purely to get to the end. And I just got to enjoy swimming, which I enjoy doing, in a beautiful setting as part of a race that was going to be very demanding. But there was no point in getting worried about how quick I was going or where the next person was next to me or any of that, because there was a long time to go. Yeah. And getting through the swim, being comfortable, making sure I was eating ahead of time, making sure that I wasn't working too hard to get my heart rate too high and taking any energy was very important. So all in all, very pleased. 2:53.23.
It's good. From a coaching perspective, probably rather than me going back through it all at the end, I'll just jump in with my thoughts at the end of each one of these stages, I think. And from my perspective, watching on, what I was interested to see was exactly as you said, because it's unusual to have to have a race where you have these loops where you're getting out of the water anyway. Usually you're in the water until that distance is done. So that gives us an opportunity we don't normally get with a swimmer at all, is to assess, to have a look. Now, the pacing itself, as you say, all I was keen to understand was that when you came out of the water, you were relatively happy. Now, you could have been cold, you could have just not liked it, all these kind of things. So it doesn't matter whether this is a great swim or not, just as long as you're not saying, I'm cramping, God, I hate this, I don't think I can get to the end, all that kind of stuff. But what was interesting to me was when you came out on the first exit of the water, which are mandatory, you have to do that, it's worth doing that. It's not a case of, right, I've decided on 4 times, they make you do it to assess you.
And obviously the field gets smaller because the half athletes, everybody starts at the same time, the half finished and the full finished, and it's just the double.
Yeah, so there's less and less in there, and you're identified by different coloured caps and things, all that stuff going on. But when you came out the first time, you were full of excitement and the joys of the swim and cracking jokes and things. Now, from a coaching perspective, usually when you've come out of a swim, we're going straight into a transition, and you're tired because you've given it as much as you need to give it to make a good time in that particular domain. Whereas in this, we were getting these kind of 4 bites, or three essentially, looks at you before the end of it to see how you were getting on. So when you came out the first time, you were happy almost to the point of being Not over the top happy, not sort of elated. Oh my God, he's gone mad or anything like that. But it was exciting to me.
That comes later.
That comes later. Yeah, it was exciting to me to see that you were in good spirits. But then the next part for me was to say, okay, that's his first time round. So it gives me a benchmark, because if he's in as good spirits by the second time, this is the mood that we hope to maintain. Now, you would expect a little bit of degradation of that, and the same. Possibly, if you've gone out too hard, a bit of degradation of pace, which didn't actually happen. Pace was pretty static, and that was pleasing to see. But I was pleased to see that from the first exit, second exit, third exit, and eventually the final fourth into transition, every time you were in the same happy place. So you enjoyed that, and again, you and I, as we've discussed a few times recently, tend to look at slightly different things. You're very much metrics driven, certainly in the field from a support perspective. I need to know how you feel, how you're actually feeling in of yourself, and that sent me a lot of great messages. Like this is not just. I never had any doubt that it would get done, frankly, but this could get done well. And at that point, so I came away from that into the support car onto the bike in great spirits myself as a coach. It was good to see.
I came out the swim fine. No real. I mean, I started to get a bit of fatigue in my shoulders and stiffness, where I thought, oh, this is going to get a bit sore. With about 200 meters to go, so. I'll take it. Got out of the water into T1, same affair, just kind of focused on getting everything right rather than rushing it. We walked over to the race HQ, which was about 2-3 minute walk from the water. Got everything we needed, got my very non-flattering highlighter coloured bib on that kind of ruined all the photos, but it's mandatory, so I'll take it. And then set off on the bike. There's not really much more to cover in T1, to be honest. 19 minutes, 39 seconds. That was very relaxed. We just managed to have a bit of chit chat, make sure I had everything, make sure everybody knew what everything was, made sure we knew what the brief was for lap 1, which was just settle into it, get a feel for the laps, and we'll maybe see you along the way. And off I went. And I was met with a pretty punchy set of climbs out of the first village after Clanberis. Can't remember what it was called, but they were really tough, and they got really tough later on. But I was surprised at just how punchy they were from the off, but that got me nice and warm. And then you enter a long period of rolling hills, which then comes into a descent into Bed Gellet, and then you've got a really long, steady climb up to the Penny Pass. You got to climb up the Penny Pass, long descent down, rolling into Clanberis, and that is a lap. However, the debrief of the lap I've just given you
Never happened
the first time round, because 44 minutes in, my Di2 fancy gearing decided to exit stage left. And as we've now discovered through Andy, the legend of a bike mechanic, absolute hero, well, that's not the last you'll hear from him, determined that there was an internal wire that had come loose. So all of the reset codes and button tapping combinations and hold for 5 seconds, all the stuff that I knew about Di2s and anyone else that stopped to try and help knew about Di2s didn't yield any results. I didn't have phone signal, so I was on the side of the road in a pretty aggressive gear, looking at a pretty aggressive hill, so I was stuck. And I was there for about 15 minutes before a car pulled over and said, "What can I do?" And they said, "Right, I'll take Johnny's number, I'll drive until I get signal, I'll call him and let him know, and then they can bring the bike." And then the bike marshal came and did the same thing, and then they got through to you, as you'll see in the video. And then they got to me with the bike. Along the way, loads of athletes stopped and offered to help. Loads of support cars stopped and offered to help. And some people were very, very all in on trying to make it work. But ultimately, nobody could come up with solutions because it needed a bike mechanic and some pretty specific understanding. So thank you to all of those people. Really, really good show of community spirit there. And I lost 1 hour and 26 minutes to the side of the road before the bike arrived. And what I made sure to do during that time, keep eating, keep drinking, except there is nothing I can do here other than wait. And thankfully, because I wasn't really being strict on time metrics and thinking, oh, my race is over, the time that I've come for is out of the window, what a waste of time, I'm just going to pack it in and go and have some beers. There was none of that.
Damn.
Sorry. But there was, oh no, this means more time in the dark on the bike, which was what I was worried about. This means less sleep opportunity. This means I'm going to finish even later. This means that everybody that was hoping to be finished early evening on the Sunday might be getting into late evening, and I've let them down, all this stuff. So I had to really focus on keeping my emotions under control, remain neutral, and ultimately I did. I'm quite proud of how I managed it. You turned up and you agreed I was in a good, good place.
It's one of those things as well, from a sport perspective. We do a very different job to you. It's grueling, certainly not in the same way as yours is, but certainly a race like that is. And you hope that the athlete can go out, do their thing, and then we have to, because we can't just follow you. Well, we did at certain points, but we're not really, it's not a great idea just to follow you around the loops. Certainly at the beginning when there's a lot of bikes on there, it'd actually be an interruption and a problem for people, probably quite dangerous in fact. So our plan was to veer off, allow you the start of the race, allow you to get your kind of bike legs underneath you and go away and re-up the support car, because we had certain things that we brought down for the bike, so we're going back to our main accommodation to change things around, and that got thrown out the window. So we were off course, planned to be, but we were off course, and nobody plans for a sort of a mechanical 45 or so minutes in. So we had to rearrange, turn around, get the kit that we needed, all the rest of it, and go back. And my focus then, with the support team as well as with you, is when I get to you to be calm, to make sure that I can sort of offer you some calm, and I'd geared myself up to bringing down your arousal level and just bringing you back to a point of sort of neutrality and working with you to help you kind of find that place where you could say, okay, I'll accept it. This is just a transient problem and we'll continue. And when we arrived, you were already calm and I didn't have to do any of that work. And I was delighted to find that for obvious reasons, but it speaks to some experience and it speaks to your overall capacity. And even the thing we talked about at the beginning of this podcast, it speaks to the ability that you have had in the run up to this to actually manage that kind of feeling of being overwhelmed by things. And although we were turning up to a problem, and hopefully providing solution, the whole experience of that 10 minutes, I suppose, that we all spent together was actually excellent. It was a delight from a personal perspective, but from a support perspective, actually probably couldn't have gone better unless we'd, gotten the opportunity to find out a bit earlier. But it worked well.
It did, and aside from being in a very aggressive gear on the road bike when it was handed to me, which meant that stylishly riding off was not an option. I was off and got through lap 1 as I described it previously. So not much really to report other than I just got my head down and stuck to the plan, which was keep eating, keep drinking and keep moving at a reasonable pace. For reference, the parameters I was looking to work towards was 25 kilometers an hour as a moving target time. I wasn't really going to worry too much about how much rest was taken. Obviously, I wasn't going to take the piss, but whenever I needed to stop, get some food on board, have a bit of chit chat, I built in wiggle room into the plan. I originally wanted to make 18 hours the sort of top end cutoff for what I wanted to do on the bike as a ballpark, and was it not for the mechanicals in the end, it would have been pretty much bang on that. So
mechanicals plural.
Yes, correct. As I said, not much happened laps 1, 2, or most of 3, but then at the end of lap 3, as I just switched over to the road bike, having been back on the tri-bike because Andy, the legend of bike mechanic, fixed it, I was descending down the Penny Pass and went to change gear on my road bike, and that didn't happen because the lever had failed. Brilliant. So for reference, Di2 is manufactured by Shimano, and on my road bike it is manufactured, my electrical gearing is manufactured by SRAM, ETAP, AXS. So 2 separate components from 2 separate companies had failed on the same day, which just so happened to be a ultra-endurance triathlon event. And the likelihood of that implies that this week I will win the lottery, and I'm very much holding out hope that the world will give me that sort of return serve that makes me feel a little bit less bitter about it. But all of the things we've just said about emotional control, pride in my experience, went out the flurry of swear words window as I could not believe what was unfolding before my very eyes and cursed the world aggressively as if I was a drunken Glaswegian who was looking towards a fight. But ultimately it was just disbelief. It was just disbelief.
Yeah, but it's perfectly appropriate to feel that disbelief. I mean, again, our job then became trying to produce a solution and some calm and all the rest of it. And we knew before we got to you that this time it wouldn't be a case of, he'll be all right again. He was last time. It's going to be, there's no way that anybody is going to come to this, as you've just described, it's a ridiculous set of circumstances that's happened again, as you've just described, and not be pissed off. So expect pissed off, let him be pissed off. It's appropriate to be pissed off. nod when necessary. Let's switch the bike up, deep breathe, and let him go again. And actually all that happened the way that it probably should have happened, but it didn't affect your ability to get back on the bike. So again, emotional control was appropriate, fist at the sky and all that kind of stuff and a lot of swear words. But you got back on the bike, a fresh bike, while we went away to fix another bike. And
that is where Andy enters. Oh my goodness.
So he was amazing.
I'm distracted because I'm trying to get the Strava file up for my bike file. But what I was trying to say was Andy then fixed the other bike, and Andy is an absolute legend. I am eternally indebted to him.
Amazing.
What a hero.
Yeah, and he did us proud. And by the time you arrived into Llanberis, we were able to choose from bikes at this point. But yeah, again, emotional control, the availability, the opportunity to say, sack it. This is obviously not happening for me. The stars are not aligning. I accept defeat. Was there on a silver platter for you?
Oh, big time. And
I dare
say,
the
thought crossed my mind.
Not to suggest that there's anything mad special going on, but I dare say a lot of athletes or a lot of individuals would have said, fuck it, at that point. And probably would have been backed up by anybody in the community to say, yeah, fair play. You're done. It's not happening for you. Good crack. Let's get the beers. But you got any bikes, swear words and all the rest of it. There was a bit of swearing as you came to the next loop and the scheduled stop that we had. But then crack on.
Yeah, that was it. And ultimately I was going into, say ultimately more, Fergus. I did this in the podcast I recorded yesterday for the Modern Mind as well. I just said ultimately every second sentence. So if you're playing a drinking game at home, sorry.
Get you a synonym thesaurus.
Yes, indeed. At the end of the day, it's basically a straight swap, isn't it?
Fundamentally.
I set off for lap 4, which was encouraging because I was like, yeah, okay, we're going to get to halfway, we're going to break the back of it, and then we're going to see it through. And there's no possible way anything else can go wrong, obviously. And that elation that I was getting towards halfway was short-lived as I started to get towards the 150, 160k mark, where I started to just look at my bike computer, and it felt like it had been going for a really long time. And I started to get a little bit tired at this point because it was getting late into the day. But obviously I've done a long swim. This is a long bike ride in any circumstances, and there was a long way to go. So I just started to get a little bit less pumped up, and then started to get a bit doubtful, actually, that I wasn't even at halfway yet. So much had gone wrong. I was a long way behind the ideal time I was looking for. I knew that darkness was coming. I knew that I was going to spend more time in the dark. And actually, at the end of this, I'm going to feel pretty burst. So how on earth am I going to get up a mountain and then do 70k on foot? This is mental. And then that negative thought pattern started to spiral a little bit, and I came in at halfway, and the feeling of, oh yes, we're halfway, we've broken the back of it, was a bit dull because I've got to do that again, and it's going to be in the night. So was it the end of lap 4 or end of lap 5 where we put the light on the bike? It was end of lap 5, wasn't it?
5, I believe.
Yeah, so I set off again quite quickly and basically just got through it, nothing else to report. And then end of lap 5, met you at the top of the Penny Pass, light was on the bike, descend down to Llanberis, and then the light started to descend, and I knew, right, the graveyard shift's coming in. At this point, I was starting to struggle to get as much food on the bike, so I was probably stopping and getting a little bit more food on whenever I was by the car. The fluids were still okay, but a lot of sodium sort of sloshing around my stomach, which is just a bit uncomfortable, but nothing out of the ordinary. And set off to break the back of it. Really, into the night we go. First lap in the dark, first half of it was quite novel. Bubble of light, ha ha ha, riding through the darkness. Everybody's going to bed, aren't you hardcore? Hoorah, Goggins. And then I realised that I don't buy into that line of narrative whatsoever. And the bubble of light just became quite lonely. And the surroundings that I knew were around me were no longer visible. I knew there were big mountains up to my right, and there was a train line over to my left, and that we were coming into this area and all that stuff. And then on the Penny Pass climb, met a few other double athletes, and then a duo. One of them was doing the double, and one of them had his mate who was riding his bike with him. And I thought, oh, that's a good idea. Because already in the dark, in that bubble of light coming from the front of my bike, I started to feel a bit lonely, and this was lap 1 in the dark. So I started to think, uh-oh, this is going to get rough. And just that brief interchange with them was really nice from a sort of social interaction, personal point of view. Dropped down in, and that was that, lap 5, the first lap in the dark done. Then got a bit more food on board, had my first hit of black coffee to wash away that real sweetness that forms in your mouth, because I was starting to get a bit concerned about my ability to keep getting food on board. And the on-the-bike food chews, gels, that sort of stuff, had become a bit untenable because every time I was eating it and then washing it down with carbs and electrolytes, I was getting a bit sick. It was making me really not want to eat anything else, and savory food, crisps, things like that were all becoming more easy to consume. So black coffee, wash that away. Practical thing to consider if you're ever doing an ultra, try and be resourceful with how you spread things out, because there's certain morale boosts that can come from food and drink that are useful and you will need them. So set off for lap 6. And about 25 minutes in, the light on my bike that advertises 6 to 8 hours of battery at low power died after 2 hours and 45 minutes to make number 3. Hat trick ball, and he's bowled him. No light. So we then thought, right, this is
truly into the darkness now.
Hilarious. It wasn't even annoying anymore. It was just like, haha, what's next? And then I got railroaded by a goose. That didn't actually happen, that part. I don't know what railroaded by a goose actually means. I don't know what that, yeah.
Hopefully one day we'll find out.
I hope I'm not on the receiving end of said railroading by said goose. So yeah, we were all laughing, thinking about, right, if we put it on charge and give you the battery pack, does that work? No, it doesn't work whilst it's on charge. So we'll put it on charge and then we'll just sit behind you in the truck. That made me feel a bit less lonely, to be fair, which was nice, but it also meant that the support team's demand was increased.
Yeah, that was a pain in the arse.
Yeah, sorry about that. And then just after the descent into Bedgellet, as I was sort of on the flatter bit just before the big climb up to the Penny Pass began, I started nodding off a little bit on the bike, veered off to the left a little bit at one point, sort of thought, oh, Christ, okay, right, focus. And then the same thing happened again. And then the car behind me, Johnny and the gang, realised, oh, he's falling asleep on the bike. So collectively, we kind of both thought, yeah, we should stop. Stopped, bit of chit-chat, sat down, got some pasta on board, which was sitting really, really well at the time and gave me a big boost. Bit of chit-chat, bit more caffeine, big dosage of caffeine actually, about the same again as a black coffee, but just a good hit of it to try and see me through. And off I went. So to complete lap 6, going into 3/4 of the way through, again, you're thinking, that sounds good, 3/4 of the way, psychologically, you must have been feeling great. In theory, yes, but I knew that there was further deterioration to come. It was all going to be in the dark. I knew that I was still further behind. I knew that I was getting tireder. And if I was tired and falling asleep on the bike now, how on earth was I going to get through 2 more laps? And then how was I going to stay awake for a run? How?
It's an interesting thing.
It just makes no sense. And in the headspace, fatigue, it just made no sense to me.
I don't know if we talked to you about this when we were out there or not, but again, with your analytical kind of mindset and metrics, etc., being important to you, the data is always worth looking at. And I had made certain predictions. I don't think I did it on camera, but I had made certain predictions about which laps would be the hardest. If you were able to separate out and just forget about the dark and forget about this and forget about that, just based on numbers, we knew that lap 7 would be horrible for you.
There was one that was it 6 where no, because 6 I stopped. There was one where I just literally got my head down. I came in at 4:30, so 2:15 to 4:30. Was that lap 7?
Yes.
So lap 7, I knew it was going to be hard as well. So we didn't actually discuss this, but I knew it was going to be hard. So I said, right, I'm leaving at 2:15. Yep. I'm going to be back here at 4:30, and I arrived at 4:30:01. Yeah,
well, we discussed it, or I discussed it a few times with a few different people, simply based on knowing you well enough to know that there would be. There's a little psychological markers that everybody goes through. So once you broke the back of 4, despite it being, oh my God, I've got 4 left, there is still some buoyancy in the knowledge that every step from that moment onwards is a step closer to the end than it was to the beginning.
You know how I viewed it? I viewed it like lap 3 out of 4 on a mile on a track. Lap 3 out of 4 on a mile is the one that makes or breaks your mile time. And that was kind of how I was viewing lap 7. It was get your head down, get through it, and then any relaxation that you want before the end of the bike, use it in lap 8.
Yeah.
And that works. So it's funny that you knew that as well.
Yeah. It changed the way we talk to you. Well, I guess it's changed the way I talk to you and all the rest of it, which is, and you did exactly what I expected you to do. It was right. I'm going to head down. I'm going to kill this one off as fast as possible, because 8 will be, knowing it's my final lap, it's going to be a very different lap, because I'm going to view everything differently. I don't have to do this again, so I can possibly enjoy it. I can look at it in a different manner. I can kind of reminisce on the horror of it all. And
narrator, he did not enjoy it.
Well, there were elements, we'll come to it in a minute, that you did enjoy. And so that, again, just as an aside, it's interesting to note that the number, without thinking of terrain, environment or anything, we just say 3 is going to be hard, 7 is going to be hard. we know that blah, blah, blah. And it panned out exactly as it would do. And your response to it was the same as we'd expected.
So conscious, we're dwelling on the bike quite a lot here. So lap 8, basically cracked on and spent some time with Paul and his riding partner for a little while, which was nice. Got to spend some time laughing at the fact that we were kind of hallucinating a little bit about leaves and things on walls and stuff, a little bit. Not as bad as it gets later on, but we were both suffering in solidarity there, so that was nice. And then I went off ahead. And as I was descending into Bedgell at 55 kilometers an hour downhill, I fell asleep. So my eyes went black and I sort of woke up like, oh no, going fast downhill, and thought, right, I'm going to stick my hand up. I need some sleep here. I do not want to fall asleep going down the Penny Pass, because that's a 70 kilometer an hour descent.
Yep.
And that is probably death. So
yeah, it's not even a straight descent either.
Yeah.
It's a pretty windy road. You'd have come a cropper there.
Oh, actually, what I didn't mention on 7, whilst it was the quickest lap towards the end of it, I was really, really uneasy coming down that descent. I didn't feel in control. I couldn't focus. I was like, right, okay, lean to the right, tilt your foot. Oh, look, there's a sheep. Whoa, whoa, where's your head gone? Yeah. And I felt dizzy because the food element was starting to, I felt like the corners were making me nauseous, as if I was seasick.
Yeah, you were tired. You were really tired at that point.
Yeah. So then getting proper food on and changing how I was eating to less of a on-the-move, long bike ride food to a bit more pasta and all that stuff. That made a big difference. So lap 8, I didn't want to come down the Penny Pass feeling the same with even more tiredness. So we pulled in and I got 15 minutes of sleep. Just as I was going to sleep, light was just starting to creep in, And as I opened my eyes 15, 20 minutes later, light was starting to appear. So in terms of tricking my circadian biology, I did go to sleep when it was dark and woke up when it was light, which I think made that 20 minutes confusingly restorative. And I felt infinitely better. But as I got out of the car and stepped back out into the outside world, I was freezing, because obviously it was cold. It was about 6 degrees, 6 degrees in the morning. And then as the sun was coming up, the colours were unbelievable. There was a mist. It was a nice chilliness. The views were stunning. There was barely anyone around. And the rest of the bike ride into lap 8 was very enjoyable. And the descent down in was just magnificent to look at, because it was a morning. I mean, people travel from all over the world to descend that Penny Pass on that morning. And I got to do it as a restorative, rejuvenating, morale-boosting bike ride. So that was the bike. And
that was beautiful. I'd like to underline that. That was a beautiful morning for all of us. In actual fact, it was stunning, and I don't think it was just an everyday morning in Wales. I think we were very lucky, to get the morning we got. Yeah. So thank you, Wales.
So bike ride was 21:26:04, but my moving time was 16:15:50. So my average moving speed was 23 kilometers an hour, which was a little bit below where I expected, but lots of things going on that sort of adjusted it, and the hills were just unrelenting. So is what it is. And that's basically 5 hours and 15 minutes lost to mechanicals. No, 5 hours and 15 minutes is the gap between the moving time and the total time. 2.5 hours that was lost to mechanicals. So the 2 hours, 45 minutes of rest time built into the bike ride was as expected. So again, beside the mechanicals, everything was working to a T. So that's where I can pat myself on the back and be like, okay, the analytical approach that I take to things has sort of worked off logically. Great. However, as I came off the bike, I had no concept whatsoever at all, in any way, shape or form, in any world, any dimension, how on earth I was going to get up a mountain. And then the heat started to come in and people started congregating, because I came in at like 7:30 in the morning, so 24.5 hours after the kickoff. There were other events on that morning, so there were swim events on, and there were people filtering through, and just being around people and being in the morning gave me a real boost. And then Jonny got 15 minutes of sleep, and we kind of slowly and disorganizedly got ready to go up the mountain, didn't we?
Yeah, we kind of bumbled, like you would expect, like two tired people.
Yeah,
trying to get their packs together. Not which way is it? Oh fuck! Has anybody got my coffee? Where? What? Who? What? All that.
We won't dwell on it much, but we started moving up Snowdon. I felt great from the off. which is surprising. I think it was just that elation, and we got to have some great chats on the way up. Emotionally, it was good to actually get to spend some time together in that circumstance, but we got to experience a fantastic morning on a fantastic mountain.
Yeah, insane. It was beautiful. Really good.
And
as you say, the juxtaposition between having been on the bike through the night, entered into that morning and up a mountain together, it was astounding. Yeah, well played again.
So top of Snowdon, great. Back down. Felt fantastic running down. We ran down pretty much the whole way, and then
Solid
there's a
pace,
really steep tarmacy bit which just destroyed my quads. So came back into Race HQ having had my confidence very, very quickly before that sapped from being, I feel fantastic, to your quads are fried, and came in 3:56.08 with 70k to go, and then thought, okay, let's just settle. You got plenty of time. Just take a minute, get some food on board. Got a bacon, egg, and added salt to it, BAP, which just sodium, and then set off. So 8 laps, 8 sets of 8.5 kilometers per lap. And my approach to lap 1 was measure out the distances that you're going to stick to as a structure so that you can be strict with yourself on when you're running, when you're walking, and what to expect, when to eat, how to approach it, etc. And as I went to start my watch for the 8 lake laps, I realised my watch had at this point packed in. My Garmin had exited the building. So I had to do lap 1 again. I'm not even going to dwell on that. Hilarious. Something else has gone wrong. Let's keep moving. And nothing could smite me now. And lap 1 was done blind, which actually, as somebody who's quite data-led, I think was quite useful because it meant I could go off feel whilst being very fatigued. Yeah. And the structure became 4 kilometres running along a cycle path and then some roads to the bottom of an absolutely horrific upwards tarmac, mile-long, steep, wall-like hill. But at the top of that hill was a aid station. So I went light, I didn't carry a trailer bag, and I wanted to use that aid station as my refuel point. And then once you got there was some downhill trails, into flat trails, into 2 really quite punchy, aggressive bits that you got to walk, into rolling trails, back down into Race HQ 8 times. So I had my structure, I knew how to approach it. It was basically run the 4K, walk the 1K, and then alternate for the rest. Refuel at the aid station, refuel at Race HQ, rinse and repeat until you're done, son. And I got to lap 4, and then I was moving well. So first lap was 1:04, second lap was 1:05, third lap was 1:06, and then the rest time in between, I wasn't really keeping a track of, I was just trying to keep it short and sweet. Jonny joined me for lap 4 so that we could break the back of it together.
3, 5, 7, and 8.
Was it? Was it 3? Yeah. Oh, my mistake. 3, 5, 7, and 8. And as I've said, ended up running 50 kilometres because he did Snowdon with me as well. The legend that he is.
Easy.
But I'm going to retract that for your shenanigans earlier, you dick. And I mean, we're not going to dwell on this too much. What happened along the way? Food, I was struggling to keep stuff on. So having the aid station, you will eat here. It was mini cheddars. It was chinning electrolytes and carbs. It was eating the savoury stuff and then getting bags of crisps down at Race HQ. And again, fluids, because it was hot, it was warm, and it was actually very humid in the woods.
Very humid, yeah.
So up until lap 6, not much to report. Then it started to get dark again. Got through lap 6, and as we were in the Race HQ tent, it started caning it down. And I mean caning it down, like biblical level rain. And instinctively I thought, best wait that out. But you couldn't wait out.
No, you'd have been waiting all night.
I'd been waiting all night. I had to keep, and I would have missed the cut-off then. So out we went. But because it was still quite warm, I couldn't have a waterproof on. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to run because I'd get too hot and I'd get rid of too much fluids and I'd probably start cramping and bonk. So I was in a long sleeve t-shirt, and that was a good incentive to actually keep running when my legs were telling me to stop. Then hallucinations got really quite weird. As the darkness descended, I started seeing shapes that I really struggled to process. The hill, the walking up that hill, that mile, was where things got really bad because I obviously wasn't running and therefore focusing on my motor pattern. I was moving at an easy enough pace that my brain could kind of go mad. And as we were having conversations, I was seeing Dick Dastardly, I was seeing Ents, I was seeing monsters from cars, and I knew that they weren't those things, but I was really trying to break down what the components were that were making it look like it. And it was often a tree and a wall or something, but really odd. And it was kind of funny, it was kind of intimidating, and then actually one of the laps I basically fell over because I thought I was getting bitten by a wolf was jumping out at me in the woods, and I just thought, this is a bit scary. I felt a bit vulnerable and childlike. But I stuck to the plan, stuck to the schedule, stuck to the routine, stuck to the structure, and with Jonny's support along the way, sometimes it was welcome, sometimes I felt like I wanted to be on my own just to sort of suffer and sort of pity myself. But ultimately, having that support was fantastic. Having the support mechanisms around it was fantastic. I managed to keep eating just enough, I'd say, just enough, which is all I needed to do at that point, and that saw me through. But I think the main thing there was being strict with when I was walking, when I was running, and that meant that there was no wiggle room in terms of working too hard or not working hard enough, and came over the finish line in 40 hours and 53 minutes. So minus the 2.5 hours of mechanicals, bang on, kind of where I was hoping to, which is nice to know that my logical application of what I was capable of was kind of the ballpark figure, but also nice to know that after all those battles, all the challenges, all the demands, all the things thrown at me, we got there. And I say we because I was just the mechanism for a much bigger team. Jonny is support leader, gold leader, in the TIE fighter behind me. No, TIE fighters are the one that the bad guys in Star Wars use, aren't they? You're in the Rebel fighters. Oh, I should have known more about Star Wars before I began this. Anyway, my support man leading the other support men and woman, Erin. It was a huge team effort, and there's 2 media crews. One video is already out. The second one will be either out or coming out from Gymshark as this podcast goes live, and it was a massive team effort, and there's no point in really unpacking things here, but from a value point of view, the lessons I've learned about myself, the lessons we've learned about one another as a team, all fantastic to have experienced, soul-searchingly difficult, but ultimately I met myself along the way. I had a lot of victories. I've gained a lot of confidence. I know more about myself. I know more about what's important to me. I've reflected upon the experience, and I'm better for it. And that's why I think these things are so valuable. If you go back to our early episodes, you'll see why you should do an ultramarathon, and ultimately all the reasons that I did this event, all the reasons that I've now deemed this event valuable, and all the reflections that I've had are very aligned with the things that we said in that podcast. So I'm conscious we've waffled quite a lot there, so I'm going to stop talking, other than saying thank you for everybody's support around the event. It's much appreciated. Thank you to everybody that's engaged with the video. It's much appreciated. And I'm going to hand over to Jonny to poetically close off.
Well, there's not much poetry really in copying what you said, but it's, Jim, Claire, and the team at the Brutal put on an excellent event. The support that they had in place, most especially from our perspective, Andy, who's been a legend. I think we'll probably be able to put Andy's in show notes or somewhere, at least point people to him so they can follow him or say well done. He was a legend. But the whole thing, from a support perspective, it is a different experience. It's a tough experience. Not nearly as tough as being out there and doing it. So we were all joyously impressed at your ability to pull through. But we bonded. We had a great time, and ultimately, as you say, we were able to get our man from beginning to end, barring mechanicals, in a time that we all felt you were capable of, and we had a bloody good time doing it. So thanks for the opportunity once again to be part of that support network, and looking forward to the next one, mate.
The one thing I did forget to mention, I lied. I said you'd heard last of me. You have not, I'm afraid. So just for the data noses out there, as I said, Snowdon was 3:56.08. The lake laps were 11:30.23. And the run total was 15:26.30. So 84.4k in 15:26.30 across 2,100 meters of elevation. So that is a debrief from a performance perspective. As I've said, thank you very much. And yeah, just to echo to Claire and Jim and the broader team at Brutal, thank you very much. Fantastic event, very inclusive with the different distances for people that want to experience triathlon in a different way. For anyone that's looking for guidance or coaching on that, that's obviously why we're here. We don't make this a marketing thing, but I mean, you should know what we do if you're listening, I'd imagine. But I'd say for those looking to dip their toe into something a bit more extreme, a bit more exciting, and a bit more demanding psychologically as well as physically, fantastic event, fantastic place, fantastic group of people, and none of the cliqueiness that you can sometimes get dragged into at certain events around the world. It was a real community, and for that, I'm also very thankful. So from us to you, thank you very much for listening. Thank you for being here. Cheers. Thank you for being a part of this journey, and make sure to do all the follow, subscribe, share with a friend,
press all the buttons,
rate and review stuff. Yeah, just go mad. Just like a child in a spaceship, press all of the buttons and do all of the things. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Cheers.